It was well known that it was Chinese weapons which were coming up to the Nagas. So you see, the involvement of China in trouble spots in the Northeast has always been there. So what General Bipin Rawat was mentioning at that time was to create battle groups which are cohesive, all arms and services, formed to achieve a particular objective. Yes, where you need inputs in terms of intelligence, you need inputs in terms of cyber, you may possibly need inputs in terms of satellite inputs. Indirectly, of course, we would be providing support to our allies. After all, you have agreements in place. See, a two-front war implies a war on both the northern and the western front, which is basically China and Pakistan combined. We also used to talk of a 2.5 front war, which also included terrorism in Kashmir, which could have an impact on operations. But that has tended to cool down. Now, when you look at a two-front war, when will it occur? It's very difficult to say. Will it occur is another very difficult question. The point is, if India-China have a conflict, Pakistan is quite likely to look at taking an advantage of an India-China conflict. So there is a possibility then of a two-front session. Now, in case India-Pakistan have a conflict, the options of China trying to take advantage, especially in a position where it is at the global stage, appears a little bit unlikely. But in case it's a two-front, it doesn't apply that you're going to be applying equal pressure on both fronts. It's going to be trying to hold one front in the defensive manner while you deal with the other front in a main manner. So it's going to be a combination of effort. Of course, it's not going to be easy because the quantum of resources in terms of troops, not only troops, but in terms of logistics, which is your ammunition, supplies, and other logistics, are all going to be increased. And normally, anywhere and everywhere, you have a certain set of troops who are available for both. So the intention has been to avoid a two-front. We've gone through 4 wars with Pakistan, 1 with China. In all of them, you've always been able to keep one side in terms of, at peace or in a silent mode while you handle the other. How will it fan out in the future? It's a very difficult game. But the possibility of China taking advantage of India-Pak doesn't appear very strong. Of Pak taking advantage of India-China does appear to be a bit more strong. In the current environment, with the way you've been able to control J&K and with the way you've been able to change the internal environment of J&K, the possibility of something very strong happening or, something very major happening is fairly less now. Yes, small incidents in terms of their sympathizers of the opposite side, especially in case it's Pakistan, you can expect a little bit here and there, but it's nothing which is going to impact operations. And since you've catered for a 2.5 front, you have availability of resources, whether they're central police resources, whether they're army resources, currently employed in CI grid, who are available to be able to handle the internal part.
Right, sir. So I read in one of your articles about Modi and Xi meeting, and they met in Bali along the sidelines of G20, and this was not released back then. It was released almost a year later. Everyone came to know about a year later. Also, you said after their meeting, there were contradicting events which were happening, where India sent out their journalists and at the same time, today, just 2 days back, China was appreciating Chandrayaan-3, and then, the stance that
the
we've
rescue
taken.
mission of the Coast Guard.
Yeah. So, I really wanted you to elucidate what is happening on that front, India-China front.
See, India-China front, as far as the LAC is concerned, the stalemate continues. Talks are on. We recently had the Lieutenant General talks, followed by the next lower level of the Major Generals that was there yesterday. The statements that came out at the end of the talks was really nothing very positive to indicate a breakthrough. So there is a stalemate which still continues. The possibility of a breakthrough doesn't appear to be bright as of now. Nor is there any possibility of things going beyond where they are currently. In the sense, you see, it's not going to go worse than where it is. Okay, and even now there is no direct progress in terms of a resolution. Now, India has made it categorically clear that unless the LAC is resolved, we are not looking at going forward in any other sphere. So bilateral relations are impacted by the LAC relations. You would also notice that India has turned down a large number of Chinese investments. India is unwilling to back China in terms of in SCO, where it refused to accept the Chinese Belt Road Initiative. It also refused to accept the economic development strategy, which had a backing of China. Now, let's see what happens in the BRICS summit. Right, so India has made it categorically clear that relations cannot be normal until you bring the LAC back to April 2020. So that is where the current scenario is. For us, we're not looking at normal diplomacy. We're not looking at normal interaction, whether it's in terms of this, that, or anywhere else. And we're not looking at things in terms of a normal relationship till the LAC comes back. But the LAC currently is at a stalemate. There is no, steps which can further push matters worse anywhere, either on their side or our side.
Right. So again, I wanted to bring in the cold start doctrine, which was acknowledged by General Bipin Rawat. What is cold start and what are its advantages and disadvantages?
See, a cold start doctrine means you take off straight from your camps because you're organized into groups for war. Now, you've got to realize that when there is a war, it is speed that counts. It's surprise that counts.
Right.
And you've got to have a force level which is capable of achieving its objectives. In the good old days, the forces would get together at a particular spot and then launch. Today, with the availability of satellites, electronic surveillance, and a whole lot of other means, such sort of surprise is not possible. So what General Bipin Rawat was mentioning at that time was to create battle groups which are cohesive, all arms and services, formed to achieve a particular objective. They launch together right from where they are located, which is normally in their cantonments close to the border, with the intention of achieving surprise and reaching the objectives before the enemy can react and create the force structure to counter it.
So what are its advantages and disadvantages?
See, the advantage is you're moving at speed, you're moving as a cohesive force structure, right? So those are the major advantages. Now disadvantages is that basically your structure may not be suited. You may need additional forces as they come in later. How will that match in? The major other disadvantage is, will you actually achieve surprise at this day, in the day today, when if you're looking at the Russo-Ukraine war, I mean, there is no counteroffensive of Ukraine which has really achieved surprise. True. So will you really achieve it is an issue. New equipment which is there, you are considering the current scenario in which, like the experience that you have of the Russo-Ukraine, you are considering your requirements as to what the equipment will be, not only today. After all, once an equipment comes in, it remains in service for 20, 30 years, maybe even more, depending on where it is to be employed. Okay, so you're going to look at future nature of warfare at that stage of time. You're going to look at maintainability, sustainability of the equipment. So all of these factors are taken in, including where are you going to employ the equipment operationally. So all that is actually catered for before you invest into a new equipment. So there's a whole process of trials, of evaluations, of assessing its employment, assessing its suitability before you actually go in for procuring it.
So recently we did have, the General Naravne sir say that there are external forces at play in Northeast. And I am assuming he's pretty much, hinting at, Chinese involvement and Pakistani involvement there. So is peace really possible with China?
See, no, generally what happens is wherever there are trouble spots, you will always have people who are trying to instigate and keep that area burning. You've had Kashmir, you had Punjab before that, you had Ulfa in Assam. Now you've got the problem which is coming up in Manipur. You had the Nagas insurgency earlier. So wherever there are trouble spots, there are always nations which always like to keep the fire simmering wherever they can. Now, for ages and ages, Pakistan blamed India for the Baluch and for the DTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. But now they continue under the Afghan government, and India is nowhere there, so they don't know whom to blame. Right. So now, as far as we are concerned, the problem, especially in the Northeast, is it borders Myanmar. There's instability in Myanmar. There are terrorist groups in Myanmar which are China sponsored. The equipment flows from there. The leader of Ulfa, Paresh Barua, is based in China. It was well known that it was Chinese weapons which were coming up to the Nagas. So you see, the involvement of China in trouble spots in the Northeast has always been there. It's not something new. And the flow from Myanmar is because the insurgent groups in Myanmar are invariably linked to Chinese interests. They're ensuring, and so that problem remains. So they are the ones from where funneling comes. Okay, so the involvement is very clear. And all groups, all the ethnicities in Manipur, they've got their own terrorist groups and their own militant groups. I wouldn't use the word terrorist here. I'd use the word militant groups in some form or the other. And we are well aware that there's a lot of influx coming in from Myanmar. So these are problems. And to a large extent, there is a link because for these guys to function, they need weapons. They have the money which flows in from drugs. So weapons are needed. Weapons come in from Myanmar, funneled through China. So there is an indirect, direct link
There. Right. So again, in another one of your articles, you had also mentioned the Bhutan angle, basically Doklam. So what is happening in that area?
Bhutan is close to India. But at the current moment, there are talks between Bhutan and China to resolve their own boundary dispute. It is unlikely that Bhutan, will be keeping India in the dark as to what is happening. Our relations go along. Our ties are immense, and they're very, very close. But what the Chinese are trying to do is to convince the Bhutanese to hand over the Doklam region to them in exchange for other areas which China is claiming.
Literally scrapping the
You
territories?
see, China has got claims on Doklam, China has got claims on northern Bhutan. So China says, if you give us Doklam, we will forget our claims on northern Bhutan. So it's basically telling Bhutan that you give us Doklam and we will resolve the border issue with you once and for all. Now, those talks are on. There is no way that India would not be aware at the right level, which is needed to be. Since Bhutan and India are close, and we have an Indian military training team in Bhutan, to a large extent, we're also responsible for the security of Bhutan. So, yes, their talks are on. There is no doubt that it's direct Bhutan-China talks. But indirectly, Bhutan would be keeping India in picture. And I don't think Bhutan will agree to anything which will be against Indian interests.
It's actually, I'm glad to hear that. This is the first time that four countries have they are carrying out a naval exercise near Australia. So though we claim that it has nothing to do with the military, we are somewhere getting there. Will Quad membership help India in case we are at war with any of our neighbors?
See, as far as the Quad is concerned, it is currently a politico-economic dialogue as of now. There is nothing per se which talks about the military act. Of course, the Malabar exercises, which were initially India-US, India-Japan, India-US, became India-Japan-US, then Australia came in. So members of the Quad started participating in these exercises. They moved from India to Japan and now they're in Australia. The fact is that these exercises do not directly indicate that the Quad is a military alliance. But the reason why you do the exercises is that the Quad will coordinate in the case of a disaster where the Quad forces are bound to coordinate. You may have a tsunami somewhere in the region. The Quad nations are going to get together and coordinate. That was how basically the Quad started. So that was the takeoff point. So basically, military exercises are with that intention. Secondly, you're homing in your capabilities in case there is a need for their employment. India as a policy doesn't serve under any other flag other than the United Nations. So we refuse to serve under any other armed force or any other nation. Now, if you look at Quad in India, as far as the land frontier is concerned, which is where the main battles are going to be fought, expecting any other nation's army to land in, no. It's our battle, we'll handle it. Yes, where you need inputs in terms of intelligence, you need inputs in terms of cyber, you may possibly need inputs in terms of satellite inputs. Now, those are where your allies will help, whether they're Quad or not. Now, you would need possibly some amount of safeguarding of your merchant convoys. In your region, you can. If it's out of your region and you need it, you may possibly get that support. So it's going to be indirect. Expecting direct support, I don't think we expected, nor would we be providing it for anyone else. For us, it's our battle, and we are in a position to handle, especially in our mountainous areas. You won't expect anyone to land there and fight the war. That is our responsibility. Similarly, as far as air power is concerned. So the only place where the Quad can actually work together is the sea, which is why the Malabar exercises and what you're seeing now. But they're more towards HADR and, of course, disaster relief.
Okay.
So it's basically towards disasters. So what you're looking at are inputs other than military, which is more of intelligence. We've been getting it earlier. In fact, when the Yangtze clash took place, the advance inputs came to us from our allies that there's something building up. So you see, those sort of inputs help you out a lot because there's continuous monitoring in this electronic world.
Right. So at this point, there's a very common question that's going around, and it says India's stance in case US and Taiwan have some tiff with China. Well, what will be India's stance?
A very difficult question because, frankly, while we talk about a one China policy, since we've agreed to it, India and China have agreed to it, but then we also have ties with Taiwan. We also sent the ex-army chiefs to Taiwan for their recent discussion that took place last month or this month. At the same time, we've signed the LEMOA agreement with the US, which enables them to use our naval bases and our air bases. basically for replenishment, as also we've also signed an agreement for repair. We've got equally close ties with Japan. The point is, we may not be directly involved. Indirectly, of course, we would be providing support to our allies. After all, you have agreements in place. Our merchant vessels, 95% of our trade is by sea. Approximately 45 to 50% via the Pacific, and the balance going in the opposite direction. In case of a conflict, would that need to be protected? How are we going to protect it? So, you see, there are multiple issues. Then a China-Taiwan conflict will have impact on India. A shortfall of microchips will impact our industry, will impact our employment. Right? Anything happening there will impact our trade routes. So there is going to be an impact on India in some form. So we would look at handling these impacts, possibly not being directly involved in the conflict. Now, the other aspect is, if China goes into Taiwan and it gets bogged down, what happens along the LAC? So China has got to take a call. Where is its area of interest? Which is the first priority? So for us, of course, the impacts are basically going to be secondary and tertiary. Partially primary because of the shipping. So we will be reacting to deal with these aspects. And of course, adhere to the agreements that we've signed with our allies. It's unlikely we will be moving our troops to participate.
You've cleared air on that. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Good
Not
day.
at all.